Imagine this. A man walks deep into the forest, then not for adventure, not for escape, but because he's haunted, not by ghosts, but by symbols, dreams that repeat, visions he doesn't understand, and a growing sense that his thoughts are not entirely his. He's not crazy. He's Carl Jung. And what he's about to discover will change the way you and I understand the human mind forever. This isn't just about psychology. This is about you, me, all of us. And a force that ties us together so deeply, so invisibly, that even now watching this you are under its influence.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Jung called it the collective unconscious. And I promise, if you stick with me, you'll see how it operates in your dreams, your fears, your desires, and even the choices you think are yours. You'll never look at your mind the same way again. Because what if I told you that much of what you are isn't even you? I didn't believe it at first either. But let's go back. Imagine being Jung. It's the early 1900s. You're trained in science. You believe in logic. But then you start seeing strange patterns in people's dreams, images of ancient gods, mythical beasts, sacred symbols. And these people, they weren't historians. They weren't artists. They were regular people, farmers, housewives, soldiers. So why were they dreaming about the same symbols? The same archetypes? That's when Jung realized something terrifying and beautiful. Our minds are not isolated. They are part of a deeper structure, an unconscious shared across humanity. Now stop for a second. Think about the last time you had a dream that felt ancient. Maybe you saw a snake, or a wise old man, or you were falling into a dark abyss. Where did that come from? Jung would say, from the collective unconscious, a psychic inheritance. Not memories passed down like stories, but structures, blueprints of experience, or archetypes. Archetypes. And this is where it gets insane. Because Jung didn't just say we share memories, but he said we share patterns of experience that transcend culture, time, and even language. But these archetypes, the hero, the shadow, the anima, the trickster, they live inside you. Right now, they guide your decisions, they shape your fears, and they whisper to you in your dreams. You ever wonder why stories from thousands of years ago still resonate with us? Why we still cry at the fall of a hero or feel chills when a character confronts their darker self? Jung would say it's because those stories are not entertainment. They're mirrors. They reflect something primal, something buried in the deepest layers of your psyche. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. If much of what you feel, fear, and desire comes from these unconscious forces, how much of you is truly you? Think about that. Are your goals really yours? Or are they shaped by an archetype, the hero's journey you've internalized from every myth, movie, and cultural expectation since birth? Let me ask you something really deep. When was the last time you made a decision that wasn't influenced by something invisible? Something you couldn't explain but felt right or wrong without logic? That's the collective unconscious at work. It doesn't speak with words. It speaks with symbols, or with gut feelings, with dreams. And now, let's go even deeper. Jung believed that the collective unconscious wasn't just a passive structure. He believed it was alive, not in the way a creature is alive, but in the way a river is alive, always flowing, changing, guiding. He believed that the archetypes could awaken in you, that they could possess you, that when you're in love, It's not just you, it's the anima or animus speaking through you. When you're obsessed with power or revenge, it's not you, it's the shadow taking over. This isn't metaphor. Jung meant it literally. That's why individuation, the process of becoming your true self, was so critical to Jung. Because without it, you're just a puppet, a vehicle for archetypes. And here's the wild part, most people never individuate. They never confront their shadow. They never integrate their anima. They live lives dictated by unconscious forces they never recognize. They think they're free, but they're not. They're just playing out ancient scripts. And now you might be wondering, what do I do about it? How do I even begin to see these unconscious forces? First, you have to pay attention to your dreams. Jung believed dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. Not just random firing neurons, but messages from the collective unconscious trying to guide you. So the next time you dream, don't dismiss it. Write it down. Ask yourself, what archetype is speaking to me? Is this the hero's call? The shadow's warning? The wise old man offering guidance? Second, look at your emotional reactions. When something triggers you deeply irrationally, it's often because it touches an archetype. Maybe your boss reminds you of a tyrannical father figure. Maybe your partner triggers your unintegrated anima. These aren't just surface conflicts. They're echoes of deeper patterns. Third, seek solitude. Jung himself spent years in semi-isolation, building a tower in Bollingen to reflect, dream, and draw. He knew that the unconscious speaks in silence. You can't hear it over the noise of social media, deadlines, and constant stimulation. You have to go inward. But beware, the journey inward is not comfortable. It's not aesthetic. It's terrifying. Because when you confront your unconscious, you confront your shadow, the parts of you you've repressed, denied, or projected onto others. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's not just poetic, that's a warning. Now think about your biggest regret, the thing you wish you hadn't done. What if I told you that wasn't really you? That it was your unconscious acting out a pattern you weren't aware of? Would you forgive yourself more? Or would it scare you? And yet, that's the path to freedom. Not by avoiding the unconscious, but by facing it. By bringing light to it. Because when you do, something amazing happens. You stop being a puppet. You start becoming a person. An integrated self. Not perfect, but whole. Let me give you a real-world example. A man has recurring dreams of drowning. He's anxious in life, feels like he's always failing. He goes to therapy, realizes he's never confronted his fear of disappointing his father, a stern, emotionally distant man. In the dream, the water is his sorrow, his shame. But the figure in the dream, a lifeguard, keeps trying to save him. That's the self, the archetype of wholeness. Once he recognizes the pattern, he stops having the dream. He begins to live differently, less driven by fear, more guided by meaning. This isn't magic, it's psychology, but it feels spiritual because it is. Jung didn't draw a line between psychology and spirituality. He saw them as the same journey, the journey to self. Individuation wasn't just therapy. It was a sacred process, a rebirth. And here's the final twist. Jung believed the collective unconscious connects us not just across humanity, but across time. He believed it touches something eternal. Clear that when you dream of an ancient temple, or a serpent, or a god, you're tapping into the same energy that guided shamans, prophets, and mystics. This isn't just psychology. It's mythic. It's cosmic. And it's inside you. So ask yourself, what dream has haunted you? What image keeps returning? What story do you keep living even though it hurts you? That's not random. That's the collective unconscious knocking on your door. Are you brave enough to answer? You've opened the door to the collective unconscious. Now, let's walk through it. What happens when you don't just view it as a theory, but as a living force within you? Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every relationship you've had, every dream, every fear, every sudden burst of creativity or moment of despair might not have originated from your personal history alone, but from a timeless reservoir of human experience. That's not just psychology. That's revelation. Think about falling in love. It feels personal, right? Intimate, unique. But Jung would say something else is at play. He would say you're not just seeing the person you're projecting an inner image called the anima or animus. The anima is the inner feminine in men, the animus the inner masculine in women. These figures, shaped by the collective unconscious, are not your partner. They're archetypes, and they carry centuries of myth, symbol, longing. You're not just falling in love with a person. You're encountering a divine image, an inner god or goddess projected outward. Let that sink in. What if every heartbreak wasn't just about the person, but about your unconscious trying to show you what you've yet to integrate within yourself? You're not just mourning a breakup, you're mourning the collapse of an archetype. And until you see that, you'll keep repeating it, over and over, different faces, same story. This is what Jung meant when he said we are acted upon by the unconscious. We think we're choosing, but we're being led. And unless we turn and face those inner figures consciously, we'll be forever trapped in their gravitational pull. And then there's the shadow, the dark twin of your conscious personality. The part of you deny, suppress, reject. It's everything you don't want to be but secretly are. Have you ever hated someone irrationally, been triggered by someone's success, someone's arrogance, someone's weakness? That's usually the shadow, not theirs, yours. Ye can be yours. Jung said the shadow is 90% pure gold. But why? Because what you repress doesn't disappear, it festers. And while it may erupt in outbursts, addictions, or projections, it also holds your raw power, your instincts, your passions, your creativity. Integrating the shadow doesn't make you darker. It makes you whole. But confronting the shadow isn't easy. It requires brutal honesty, a willingness to look at the ugliest parts of yourself and say, yes, that too is me. It's in those moments when the mask slips, when you're alone with your rage, your jealousy, your despair, that the real work begins. That's where transformation lives. And this is where Jung's work becomes not just insightful but revolutionary. Because he didn't want to fix people. He wanted to awaken them. He knew the psyche wasn't a machine, it was a mystery, a living myth. And you're the protagonist of that myth. Have you ever had a dream so vivid, so bizarre, that it lingered for days? Maybe you were being chased. Maybe you were flying. Maybe you met a figure, a stranger, who said something you can't forget. Jung would say, that's the self speaking to you. The self in Jungian terms is not your ego. It's the totality of who you are and who you could become. It's the God within, the center. And here's the paradox. The ego thinks it's the center of the psyche. But it's not. The ego is just a light bulb. The self is the electricity. When you dream of temples, mandalas, circles, or wise guides, those are symbols of the self. Your unconscious trying to reconnect you with your deeper being. So how do you begin this journey of individuation? How do you move from being a fragmented self tossed about by unconscious forces to someone whole, integrated, awake? First, you must observe. Observe your dreams, your reactions, your patterns. Jung said, who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. Start looking inside. You keep a dream journal. Reflect. Don't interpret too quickly. Let the symbols speak. Second, you must confront. Confront your projections. When someone triggers you, instead of judging them, ask, what part of me am I seeing in them? What am I denying in myself that I'm projecting onto them? Third, you must create. Jung believed the unconscious expresses itself through symbols, and one of the best ways to engage it is through art. Paint your dreams, write your myths, dance your fears, don't censor. Don't explain, just express. The unconscious doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in metaphor, rhythm, image. And finally, you must surrender. Surrender to the mystery. Jung was a scientist, yes, but also a mystic. He knew there were things the psyche held that no equation could explain. He studied alchemy not for its chemistry, but for its symbols. He saw in the alchemist's search for gold a metaphor for transformation. The lead of the unconscious turned into the gold of the self. And this is where the collective unconscious becomes not just personal, but universal. Because when you confront your shadow, integrate your anima, and awaken the self, you don't just heal yourself. You heal the world. Why? Because the world is made sick by unconsciousness, by projection, by the refusal to look within. Jung believed that modern society was suffering from a loss of soul, that we were cut off from our myths, our symbols, our inner worlds. And when that happens, we become empty, addicted, numb. We fill the void with consumerism, distraction, ideology. But the real cure, it's inner work. You are not just a person. You are a carrier of the archetypes, a vessel of the collective unconscious. And when you do your inner work, you don't just change you change the field. You become a node of consciousness in a sea of sleepwalkers. So here's my challenge to you tonight, before you go to sleep. Ask your unconscious for a message, but say it out loud. Show me what I need to see. Then dream, and in the morning write it down. No matter how strange, no matter how disturbing, that's your psyche speaking. That's the ancient river inside you, whispering its secrets. And if you're brave enough to listen, really listen, everything changes. You begin to see your life not as a series of random events, but as a myth in motion. You begin to see your crises as initiations, your relationships as mirrors, your pain as a teacher, and your dreams as maps. This is the journey of individuation, the sacred path back to the self. It's not easy, it's not quick, but it's real. And once you begin, you can't go back. Because once you taste the truth that you are more than your ego, that your soul is ancient, that your life is a symbol, you can never again be ordinary. Let me leave you with this. What if the person you're becoming has already existed in potential, waiting for you to awaken? What if the gods, the myths, the symbols, they're not out there? They're in here, in your blood, in your dreams, in your unconscious. Are you ready to face what's been buried for thousands of years inside you? Let's finish this. Now that we've opened the door and walked through it, now that we've stared into the mirror of the unconscious and seen not just ourselves, but the entire human story, the final question becomes, what now? What do we do with this knowledge? How do we live, knowing that deep within us are forces we didn't choose, myths we didn't write, patterns that move us like tides? How do we live consciously in a world where most people are asleep, acting out archetypes without even knowing it? Jung didn't give us easy answers. That wasn't his job. He gave us tools, maps, and more importantly, he gave us permission to go deeper, to not settle for surface-level happiness, to not accept a life of quiet conformity. He invited us to go through the chaos, the symbols, the madness, because on the other side is something more powerful than comfort, meaning. Let's talk about meaning, because in today's world, that's what people are starving for. Not just pleasure, not just distraction, but real, soul-deep meaning. And meaning doesn't come from achievement, likes, followers, or wealth. It comes from alignment with yourself, with the archetype that wants to be born through you. Jung believed that every person has a unique myth, a personal legend, a sacred story written in the language of symbols and dreams. And most people never discover it. They live borrowed stories, cultural scripts, parental expectations, societal roles. But deep down, they know, they feel the emptiness, the disconnect, the anxiety that comes not from danger, but from disconnection, from soul loss. Have you ever felt that? That quiet ache that something is missing, even when everything looks fine? That's the call. The same call that the hero hears in every myth. The call to awaken, to leave the village, to enter the forest, to face the dragon. And the dragon, my friend, is always within. But it's the fear, the shame, the wound, and the truth you've been avoiding. And yet, that inner dragon holds the treasure, always. Here's a radical idea. What if your suffering isn't a mistake? What if your depression, your anxiety, your confusion, what if they're not pathologies, but messages? What if they're the psyche's way of saying, you've drifted too far from yourself? Jung saw neurosis not as something to get rid of, but something to understand. He said symptoms are symbolic. They carry meaning. They're the language of the soul, crying out to be heard. And when we listen, really listen, something incredible happens. We start to heal, not by fixing, but by integrating. By bringing the rejected parts of ourselves into the light, the shadow, the anima or animus, the child, the wise old man, the trickster, all those figures you thought were not you. They are you, and the more you bring them into consciousness, the more whole you become. But what does it mean to be whole? It means you are no longer ruled by the unconscious. You still feel fear, anger, love, longing, but now you understand where they come from. You no longer project your shadow onto others. You recognize it, you own it, you integrate it. And that changes everything. You stop blaming. You start transforming. Because once you've met your inner darkness, you can face the outer world with clarity. You begin to respond, not react. You begin to create, not just consume. You begin to live from the inside out. This isn't philosophy. This is transformation. And it's terrifying, because to become whole, you must die, not physically, but psychologically. The ego must surrender. The false identity must crack. And in that death, the self is born. This is why Jung called individuation a kind of initiation, a death rebirth process, just like ancient rites of passage. Just like the shaman's journey, you descend into the underworld of your psyche. You face your fears, you confront the shadow, and if you survive, you return with a gift: wisdom, power, compassion, and most importantly, authenticity. Let me ask you this: who are you when no one is watching? When the masks fall away, when the archetypes quiet down? That's the real you, and finding that self, not creating it, but uncovering it, is your life's work, your sacred task. But here's the paradox: the more you uncover yourself, the more you realize it's not just yours. It's collective, it's universal. We all carry the same templates, the same fears, the same longings. And when you understand that, something shifts. You stop judging others so harshly. You begin to see that their drama, their chaos, their projections, they're just lost in their own archetypal storm. You begin to feel compassion. And now we're touching the deepest layer of Jung's vision. Because ultimately, the collective unconscious isn't just a psychological theory. It's a mystical truth. It's the inner fabric of humanity, the shared soul. And when we awaken to it, when we individuate, we don't just become ourselves. We become human, fully human. Jung said the greatest threat to humanity wasn't technology, but it wasn't war. It wasn't politics. It was the unconscious, the unexamined shadow of the collective, a projection, dehumanization, mass psychosis. And we've seen it time and time again in history, in ideology, in the way we turn others into enemies to avoid facing our own darkness. That's why this work matters. That's why it's not just personal, it's sacred. Because every time you integrate a piece of your shadow, you make the world a little less violent. Every time you embrace your inner feminine or masculine, you soften the rigid roles society enforces. Every time you follow your dream, you remind others that they can too. You become a living myth, and in doing so you awaken others. You become a mirror, a guide, a spark in the darkness. And that's how change begins, not from the top down, but from the inside out. Then from the individual soul, healed and whole, radiating that wholeness into the collective field. Now I want to bring this full circle. Remember the man who walked into the forest, haunted by symbols? That was Jung. But it could also be you. You walking into the unknown of your own psyche. You facing the dreams you don't understand. You questioning everything you thought was you. And in that journey, if you're brave enough, you find something more precious than certainty. You find soul. You find the parts of yourself that were waiting to be remembered. The child who stopped dreaming. The artist who stopped creating. The lover who stopped loving. The warrior who stopped fighting. They're all still in you, buried, waiting, and the key to unlocking them. It's not out there, it's inside. So here's my final challenge tonight. Sit in silence. No phone, no music, no distractions. Just you and your breath. And ask yourself, who am I really? What archetype is trying to live through me? What part of me have I ignored for too long? And what myth am I here to embody? Don't expect a clear answer. Expect symbols, feelings, images. That's how the unconscious speaks. Don't rush it. Don't analyze it. Just listen. And over time, you'll begin to see a pattern, a thread. A story will follow that thread, because that is your myth. That is your path. That is your truth. And when you live it not perfectly, but authentically, you do something extraordinary. You become a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, between the personal and the collective, between the world as it is and the world as it could be. You become whole. And in a fragmented world, wholeness is the most radical act of all. So I'll leave you with this final soul-shaking question. What if the entire universe has been dreaming through you, waiting for you to remember who you really are? Now go, dream, wake up, and live your myth.